Okay, so thanks so much for joining us tonight, Ben. Really appreciate your time. I know you've been doing some great stuff with the delegates and Ron Paul delegates. Why don't you start off by telling us some of that cool stuff you have been finding out?
Well, there's just so much going on. You know, we're talking about these delegate contests that are going on across the nation. And Tracy, the reality is most people have no idea how this delegate process works. And that includes, I would say, especially most media or most journalists. They have no idea how this works. And yet they report on it like they're experts in it. And granted, it's complicated, but you do people a disservice when you don't understand the system yourself. And so you bypass the important elements of it. What we're seeing is, obviously, you have all these state contests that are taking place right now. And the earliest states, back in February and March, where they held their straw polls, and the media, of course, thought that was the end of it, are now having their state contests. And now we're finding out who the delegates really are and what the delegate count really looks like. And it's very different, as you know, than what's being reported.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot different. I went through something at the beginning of the show with the actual numbers, and in some places he's actually got 83 and 73% of the delegate count. And we see now the establishment starting to get kind of scared. What can you say about that?
Well, the establishment should be a little bit scared because even though, again, media is not really reporting this stuff, there's this terrible thing out there called the Internet by which people are able to get all this information. And so what we're finding is, especially, for instance, we're going to talk tonight in Reality Check about this Rule 38 the RNC has. And it's a very important rule, and it states that no state or congressional district can bind its delegates to vote as a unit, meaning they cannot have the bound delegates that are headed to Tampa will not be bound. And if that's the case, look, I'm sure you ran down these numbers, but in the congressional districts in Massachusetts this past weekend, Paul takes 16 of 19 congressional delegates. In the district caucuses in Louisiana, he's got 111 out of 150. Those numbers are staggering. So what you're actually going to see, if you're going to honestly follow this, is the presumed count, right, of delegates that Romney has. And you're actually going to see that number sliding down and the number for Paul going up. And it's going to be pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I know a whole bunch of people going down to Tampa just to watch this all unfold. It's going to be kind of like kind of crazy and exciting in the process. And it's just interesting to see how now we're doing things that are shady and they're not legit when we're actually following the rules right down to the letter.
Right, and what we're finding, of course, in all these contests, for instance, in Washington, Alaska, is it's the RNC and it's the state GOP who are not following the rules. They're breaking all of their own rules, including most recently, you know, the RNC now putting money into the Romney campaign, which violates their own rules. Rule 11 states that you cannot put money into a candidate's bank account, essentially, or into their campaign, while primary is still going on, and yet that's happening right now. The problem is, again, it's a lack of fundamental education by the media to hold these parties accountable. No one's holding them accountable. In fact, I would say most journalists are taking their lead from the party because they just don't understand how it works.
Well, you're holding them accountable, thankfully, and we appreciate that more than anything. I mean, you know, do you get in trouble for this? I would have to assume that there'd be some, like, shady backroom, be quiet, Ben Swann.
No, I mean, we're owned by Raycom Media and not Fox. And so, for the most part, they've kind of given me leadway to do what I'm doing. I will say this: I think one of the things that is most important, at least in the process right now, is the support that I've gotten from people across the country and really around the world. I mean, we have people who are watching Reality Check from Finland and Sweden and Australia, all over the place. And so, the support that I get from those people really protects me, at least at this point. And so, you know, it's kind of an interesting deal. I will say this, though. I think what we're about to see is a total, you thought the media blackout was bad before, it's almost a reversal now where media is going to be trying to catch up with what's going on. If they think it's actually going to head to a brokered convention, all of a sudden, most Americans are going to be like, what's going on here? Because we thought this was over, and now, you know, what's happening now?
Yeah, I find that very interesting. You know, people are actually going to have to be educated on the revolution. And you said before that you're not necessarily a Ron Paul supporter. You're just kind of looking to expose the truth, so to speak. Is that the case, or are you big? I know you're very liberty-minded, but do you have any candidate you actually support?
Well, yeah, I'm definitely liberty-minded and a constitutionalist. And so, you know, my belief is it's not so much about the candidate themselves as about protecting liberty and protecting the Constitution. So, you know, as far as, I mean, I don't really want to endorse anyone or you know, back anyone per se, because it really has nothing to do with what I do, which is to hold them accountable. I mean, regardless of what a candidate might say about themselves, if the rhetoric does not match the actions, then it doesn't really matter to me. So I think that my job is really not to necessarily support one person or another. I do think that it's incredibly frustrating when you're the only one, and you guys know how this is, but when you're the only one saying this stuff, and yet you have people saying, well, what are you doing? I mean, this thing's over, and why are you still covering this? And a lot of people, I think, are beginning to believe that I am just kind of pushing something here to try to keep Paul's name out there, and that's not the case. They just don't see it because their eyes are closed.
We know about that all too well. Do you remember by any chance when your support started to rise exponentially? Because I think I do. I'm just wondering if it's around the same time period.
Yeah, I can tell you exactly. It was November 18th of last year, and that was after I did the piece to ask for fairness and coverage for the Congressman Paul. And again, it wasn't done really, I didn't even think there was anybody out there listening to it because I had no idea there were so many folks out there who were, you know, really supporting him because, again, there's so much blackout. And so the only thing I had noticed was, again, that he had gotten 89 seconds in that CBS debate and thought it was nonsense, you know, and not because I necessarily supported what he had to say, but how do you take a guy who's polling at the time, I think he was polling third or fourth, and you give him 89 seconds, and then you've got John Huntsman and Rick Santorum, who at the time were polling dead last. They weren't even getting numbers in terms of percentages, and they were getting 5 minutes respectively. So I was just asking for fairness and found out there were a whole lot of people out there who were asking for the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. We all are asking for fairness, and that's why before you seemed a little bit taken aback on the phone when I said everyone was so excited that you were going to be here, but you know, we appreciate what you're doing so much, and you know, we've been fighting this for years and years, and to have someone as an advocate that's, you know, doing what you're doing is just really, really great. Maybe we'll take some questions after your response.
Yeah, you know, to be honest with you, I'm really humbled by the whole thing because I don't think that I'm anything other than just a young guy who's trying to do his job and do it well. And personally, I've been frustrated for a long time with a lot of what I see in media and the lack of things. And I almost feel like kind of what I'm doing now is without sounding too cheesy, but it's what I was born to do. I mean, the reality is that my passion is really communicating effectively things that matter to people. And so the whole idea of, you know, doing fluff news, entertainment news, talking about, you know, Kardashians and that kind of thing, that's enough to make me pull my hair out. Not that there's anything wrong with the Kardashians, but I'm just not interested in doing that for a living. And I feel like now I've been given the opportunity, unbeknownst to me, to really be a part of something important.
Okay, so someone asked, Ben, did you get a weird vibe at Fox News?
Oh, when I did the deal with Bret Baier. No, I mean, I'll say no.
Okay, short answer, no. We know there was more to that one. Now, Frank has a question. Hold on. Oh, if Paul manages to get enough delegates to win, are there tricks or shenanigans that the establishment can attempt to pull to rob him or make it difficult?
Well, definitely. There are definitely a number of things they could do. One of the things I expect to see in the next few months is the attempt to change the rules so that Rule 38 is no longer going to be applicable. I'm sure they'll attempt to bind every delegate possible. The other thing is you're immediately going to start hearing, I mean, there's certain terminology that's used, and they start kind of testing the waters for it. And some of that terminology we're already hearing are things like stealing caucuses, taking over caucuses. In fact, I posted on my Facebook tonight, Matt McDonald over in Maine sent me the email from Charlie Webster that went out today in regards to their caucus, which is this weekend, and it's already using terms like Ron Paul supporters plan to take over the caucus. We have to prevent them from doing that. You know, and they're already trying to prevent, and this isn't Paul supporters, Romney supporters, Santorum. They are trying to prevent Republican voters in Maine from being able to elect a chairman at their caucus. And that's not a Paul issue or a Romney issue. That's just an issue of voters' rights. And apparently in the Republican.
You actually did a really great couple of pieces on how they made the parking lot I don't know, delegate selection process or nominating process, and they actually arrested someone. And I was so happy to see you take so much time on that. And any other thoughts maybe on that?
Well, the follow-up to it, if you hadn't seen it, is that the guy who was arrested it was in St. Charles, Missouri, and Brent Stafford is his name. Brent was actually arrested at the caucus because the GOP was breaking the rules. They went outside. They attempted to hold the caucus peacefully. They weren't trashing the place. They weren't destroying things. They were peacefully attempting to hold a caucus. And next thing you know, he gets arrested. Well, they went back and did a do-over, and Brent Stafford, the same guy who was arrested, winds up being elected chairman of the St. Charles, Missouri caucus, and he winds up running the whole thing. So a huge victory there in terms of that. But what's really sad about it is, again, you have this issue where these aren't radicals. These aren't anarchists. These aren't people who are trying to, destroy things. These are people who simply just want to be able to vote. They want to have their voice heard, and it's I don't know. It's crazy to me how this stuff gets spun.
So what happens? I mean, are there enough of us that are going to stand up to this backhanded sort of stuff that's going on, do you think? I mean, I personally feel like it's not going to be able to propagate. I think that it's going to be stopped by people for once. Thoughts on the power of our movement, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think it could. I mean, I think what you essentially have is if enough of these supporters get into delegate spots, which again, if we're talking about the actual delegates in these bound states, many of those contests haven't even happened yet in terms of the state convention to select them. And so if you really do have this kind of revolution that happens within these caucuses and they're taken over, you go to Tampa and, at the very least, you put up a huge fight. You get a huge fight on the floor, and you make them recognize what's happening. And I think that will happen. Somebody asked me today, they said, honestly, there's no chance that Romney's not going to get this. And I said, well, that's not true. There is a chance he won't get it. If Ron Paul gets more delegates who go to Tampa than Mitt Romney, Paul wins. It's that simple. And to assume that it's not going to be that way because of some straw poll contests that have happened around the country, I think, people are sadly mistaken. But again, the folks who are a part of this movement and who are really his supporters, they're the ones who are engaged. The folks who don't realize it's going to happen are the ones who are supporting everybody else and not paying attention.
Agreed, and I think it's really exciting. And someone's asking actually if you plan on attending any state conventions to do any live or recorded reporting.
Yeah, not at this point. I'd like to. Certainly wish that I could. Maybe something here in Ohio. It's pretty difficult at this point to get away. But so far, I really haven't needed to because there's so many folks out there who are doing that with their cell phone cams, and they're getting that video. And I get so many emails every single day from people who are sending me video and sending me information. So, and again, feel very blessed to be in that position where so many people are turning to me and saying, okay, here's what I've gotten, here's what I've collected, here's what I've recorded, now do something with it. And they're trusting me with that. So, and I take that responsibility pretty seriously. It is a responsibility.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, our next guest on the show, David Andrew Gay, asks a question. Would you consider making a documentary later this summer to chronicle how many county, congressional district, and state supporters there have been, GOP committees have been taken over by Paul supporters? He says he thinks once the delegate story is over, this is going to be the next big one.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think it would be fascinating to put together a documentary just talking about this entire campaign season and what's happened. One of the things that we're working on in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be doing a piece. I've asked people to send me pictures from the Ron Paul rallies that they've been at around the country, because again, these are issues that are being blacked out. You have almost 10,000 people show up in L.A. and 5,000 in Fort Worth and 3,000 at A&M, and my hometown of El Paso, Texas. He was just there. I'm up here in Ohio. He's down there. But there was just fantastic stuff going on. And again, it's not getting covered. So we're going to be putting some stuff together on that. But definitely at the end of this season, I think it should happen.
Someone also wants to know why you think the media is trying to black out the message of liberty and is promoting the establishment.
I really don't know. I really don't know, other than possibly, I really think it's twofold. One is from the higher ups. I think the ownership, there are issues there, certainly. But I think just on the lowest levels of it, I really believe it's just a lack of understanding, and it's a groupthink mentality where everybody chooses to think the same because if they do, then they feel safe in that. So I think there's a certain amount of, well, it's an ugly term, but I think it's a certain amount of ignorance that goes along with it. And Tracy, I actually have to leave you there because I got a thing coming up here for tonight.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ben. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy.